You wanna know what other things there are that I like? Let me paint you a picture then. Sometimes when I'm working, just like some of you out there, I like to listen to something in the background to keep me focused. A lot of you might watch Friends or Big Bang Theory or pretty much anything as a sort of white noise to keep out the intrusive thoughts. I mean, keep your head in the game, right? But for me, that has to be listening to puzzling stuff, like CoffeeZilla or Some Ordinary Gamers, Philion, Turkey Tom, you name it. Mostly because their journalistic stuff like reporting on scams or fraud or beef with other people gives my mind a puzzle to work on. Things like that tend to keep me focused when I'm doing anything. And there I was watching Coffee's video on Zoo Token for the, I lost count how many times I actually watched that video, alright? But you get the point. And that's when it struck me. How did that happen? Elaboration. How did a retorque such as Logan frickin' Paul end up with a flustercock like Zoo Token? Yeah, extensive history in alleged scamming, yada so on and so forth, but that's not my point. You might be wondering, what is a retorque? Well, you see, in physics, torque is how much a force causes something to rotate, depending on how far from the pivot point the force is applied to. In car mechanics, proper torque ensures that bits and pieces are secured without being over-tightened or too loose. Now this guy clearly has a couple of his nuts and bolts loosened over time and therefore needs to be retorqued. As a matter of fact, I cannot believe I'm defending Logan Paul. He could indeed be a victim in this case himself. And the question still remains, how did this happen? There are many parties involved. Lots of beans have been spilled, along with timbers that were shivered during the Zoo Token shenanigans. But my question is more on the technical aspects. Now prepare thyself for a buzzword salad, because since yours truly has studied computer sciences for master's degree specifically in artificial intelligence, I have a liking towards these sort of topics. I know how to research and understand technology, but not everything is taught in school. It's like ever since I understood the weakness of my flesh, it feels as if I need to know more about our future machine overlords. Alrighty, that was quite a wild rant for this intro, my fellow cultists, so let's just jump straight into it. I don't think I need to spend this entire time reciting everything that has been said about the Zoo Token project, because the number of documentaries out there are enough to cover it as is. And my focus is on this guy, Eduardo Ibanez. Now Eddie Boy here was supposed to be the tech guy in this project. He was the grease to cover Logan's gears, the lube in Diddy's house, and the elastic band of the underwear. You'll get the idea. Now this guy has his prime qualifications with a double honorary doctorate in yapology and bullshittery. The thing is, during my studies there were a couple of classes introducing the topic of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but those courses were more generalized and abstract in their nature. As in, we were taught about the concepts, but didn't get any assignments to fully grasp the said concepts and possibly code such applications. Surely, if I want to pursue learning more about developing a crypto project, there must be useful sources on the interwebs, because someone must have figured out how to code these Web3 applications in advance. It should be possible to learn it without prior knowledge, and that's what I did when I went down a rabbit hole to find the truth. For example, if you want to build a website, you can go with JavaScript and HTML. And there are a lot of platforms with predefined templates that you can use, or alternatively just make your website from scratch, using the same tools. Now in case of crypto, what are those tools? I am totally 100% without a shadow of a doubt the first person who is going to tackle this subject. There is no chance that this has been done before, and we are absolutely going to the depths of the deep web and interrogating people and going on covert ops to deal with our ops and the secret Yakubian cabal ruling over Earth, and then we take over the flat hollow globe. Here is the plan on how we are gonna do this. First, we gotta figure out the general scheme of how a project comes to be. The initial development stage needs a bit of planning and research to list all of the required functions and tasks, and then how such things could be performed. Second thing is, we must understand how a concept is implemented. What do I mean by that? Well, a software code is just a bunch of text files and scripts, which means it has to be read somehow. So where does it go? This is a huge question. Say I write the program's code, and then what? That goofy looking shih tzu mixed with a bulldog to make the abomination of a bullshit isn't just graphics and Photoshop. Well, it literally is in case of Zoo Token, but my point still remains on understanding how to code it. Thirdly, what are the costs? This is the part where I said Logan himself might have been a victim of getting scammed, because in his words, he spent about a couple $1,000,000 on development and deployment. That is, excluding the failure costs of refunds and legal fees and everything else. But more specifically, what was that 1.5 mil wasted for? That is one of the key questions here. And the last objective would be, how easy is it to replicate something like that? Now I understand, because of my background and training in the theoretical part of it, I could probably learn and make it happen a bit faster, but that's only for the pen and paper. What about someone who hasn't studied with the tech priests of Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars, but has a great idea for a game changer that could surpass Bitcoin and redefine the blockchain? Or it's just this guy who wants to put his dink doink on Web3. To recap that entire thing, let me break it down for you. We must find out our project requirements, tools, and how much moolah to be spent on those things. And more importantly, how difficult is it to pull it off. All of that just to find a rational justification for 1.5 million US dollars to be spent on a possibly criminal disappointment. Let's see how one is supposed to figure out the kinks of a crypto project. Well, of course, I'm gonna resort to the jack of all arses, the master of goof, GigaChat GPT itself. I gave it a couple of prompts to outline what is considered as the basics and what sort of initiatives must be taken. To no one's surprise, it gave me a lengthy lore on what the entire process would look like. I'll spare you the entire script for now and give you the watered down version instead, okay? First, we gotta conceptualize the project like how Ty Lopez manifests money, Lambo, and beaches by doping on knowledge within his thoughts, whether he is awake or asleep. It goes without saying that, duh, I do have to make up an image to know what my results will look like. In this case, let's call it Abushi coin. Then we must choose a blockchain platform where Abushi coin will be deployed to. Yeah, okay, just like previously mentioned, it is part of the concept, and say we go with Ethereum or something like that. What's next? Choose a smart contract for the basis of your concept. Hey yo, my man, you don't have to post every single thing as part of the bullet point, alright? We got it. We gotta make up a concept and go with it. What's next? So after it went on a wild rant about how a concept is made, I got that the first thing that must be done is to imagine a Abushi coin in full detail. I figured that it's gonna have to be deployed on ERC20, and then it must have a smart contract plus an idea plus an imagery, etc concept made. What happens after we do that? How do I code this bloody thing? These are the questions that matter. It was then that it said, well, the coding can be very difficult and time consuming and must be well planned and properly conceptualized. It was at this very moment that I chose a different way to prompt it, and I'll save you on the headache by getting over the extra wordy thingies. After concept, what we need in terms of the software codes are, but not limited to, a token generator, a smart contract, and optionally there are a few things such as something called a DApp, or a decentralized application, a consensus mechanism for building a new blockchain, and I figured that at this point we don't need these last two items because, well, we're not making a new blockchain, we're just trying to figure out how it works. And the final part of the project's workflow was explained as basically running a bunch of diagnostics and patching bugs before deployment. The key focus points here are the token generator and the smart contract. The way I try to understand these two is that one makes a Abushi that people buy and the other validates that indeed someone has bought or minted the above mentioned Abushi. That's great because now I have a lead on where to start from. These things are software code, so in the very basic aspect, it must have two factors for writing it. What is the language and what compiler accepts that language? Then, Chat, the OG PTSD, gave me a list of coding languages that does that job, but the most prominent one is supposedly Solidity, while other formats like C-Base or alternatively the family of Java the Hutt could be used too. These all seem like a very lengthy, technical and highly specialized topic because it all involves pretty much everything from the basics of the coding language to creating the rules that govern over the token's behavior. Then an epiphany struck. Say I'm in the same shoes as Eddie. What would I do if that was the situation? If you guessed anything other than looking for a shortcut, you would be very wrong. So I asked about the shortcuts to developing the smart contract and token generator files, to which I got the hilariously comical answer that these files can be automatically generated within a place called OpenZeppelin, where it just makes up the contract however you like it, all the way up the stairways to crypto heaven. Another method would be to just go to GitHub and clone someone else's work. In case of Eddie, I suppose copy pasting or plagiarizing are not really things to be off the table. So we got the answers we wanted, but raised another question in the process. Where do all these files go? If I'm doing Web3 apps and it's supposed to be all on the block, do I have to get a special compiler, or can I just install NetBeans or Visual Studio and call it a day? Apparently, the answer to that was that for blockchain stuff, there are a variety of compilers that are online. It's like a website you go to and do the code magic thingies, and there is not really a need to have a local compiler, which makes sense. One such that Chatboy recommended is called Remix. What is next? Apparently a 1-2 combo of Ctrl-C and Ctrl-P is involved to just copy paste the code from GitHub or OpenZeppelin into the Remix thing, and that's it. You can just directly use that to publish a bullshit and it will go on the chain. Poof, job done. Is it free of charge? Well, not quite. You do have to pay a small fee, like a couple $100 for the gas fees, and then the token actually goes online. If you are following me so far, we have got the requirements, concepts, tools all figured out, and for the most parts, it's free of charge. And I still don't see anything worth $1 million. I have to dig deeper. Something doesn't feel right about this at all. Here is where we get to talk about the fun stuff, where discoveries and theories come into play. Now we want to know how the funding of this project was budgeted and what them spreader cheats would look like. What sort of fees are there? Let's play this topic by topic, and I'm gonna go with a hefty dose of Occam's razor because maybe the simplest explanation we can come up is what probably may have happened in reality. But I might be wrong as fluff, and these are nothing but speculations, and that's the whole point. I want to not only learn how such schemes are conceived, but also analyze the technical things that go behind the entire operations. Just for a bit of recap, if you lost it along the way, we figured out the concept plus the token generator and smart contracts are things that can be made without any charges. Another matter is that the tools used for these project thingies are also entirely free of charge and free to use for the most parts. What remains is the cost for the full stack developments of the website and the Adobe Pokizoo ecosystem. An Adobe membership doesn't cost that much, as well as using tools like WordPress and Squarespace would make the full stack development easier. So let's say a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 for these things altogether. I had to include Adobe because for the website and the bullshit game elements, we need to be able to edit them goofy looking critters JPEGs, plus the ripped off Getty's images that would be used for the UI elements of the website itself. The more costly thing in this part of the topic is the website host and domain, for which I'll assume a generous figure of another couple $1,000 for that as well. Next in line would be the time and staff costs. Given the impressive amount of effort that was put into the imagery, plus the user interface of the game, I'll give it probably 1 or 2 months for the time aspect, and if it all went by a template and just required modification to adapt Web3 protocols, an additional 1 month or so to get the website and game up and running. So I'm just gonna round up the required time from concept to prototyping to deployment for this project. I'd say it would have only taken about 5 months, and I'm saying that with a smirk. Financially speaking, since Eddie would have been a smart boy to get the most bang for the buck by using what's freely available, about $100,000 in the funds could be a rough estimate for how he envisioned the project going, and I'll explain why. Aside from the allegations about him being a scammer, there are also rumors of him allegedly not paying his team members and staff. I can already imagine that people may have been hired as unpaid interns just to make the mess that eventually we get to know of, and promise they would be paid once they are full-fledged employees. Alternatively, even if they were full-time employees, they would have probably been lowballed or not paid at all. That $100K I put for the budget and timeline of the development would make sense. What about the rest of the 1.4 mil? Got no idea, man. It's not adding up. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but with a lot of the prerequisites being free and Eddie not having a good track record, this would be a simple explanation of sorts. And my fellow cultists, that's where my hypothesis might start to fall apart. Gotta make a side note here. Back when Zoo Token was being developed, AI tools and chatbots like Master Chat GPTs were not fully operational. So the possibility that the code may have been prompted using these sort of ML tools would have been highly unlikely. And there is a reason I have to specify this, because if these AI models were in fact present back then the generous timeline I gave would have been drastically shortened, since it would have only cost an additional $20 a month for a premium subscription to use something like Mr. GPT. Another factor that you might have noticed by now is that I did not include transaction fees like gas prices. Well, that could have easily been coded in a way that the person minting the tokens was already paying for it. Therefore, the developers did not have to pay a single dime for the network fees. Aside from that one-time thingy in the beginning where they paid a few $100s for the first batch of tokens being issued. Going over the checklist I mentioned at the start, it is time to discuss replication. Remember when we were younger and used to watch Steve-O, and there was parental advisory saying that we should not try this at home? Yeah, me neither. I'm gonna try this at home. When I asked chat, not you silly, the AI, to provide me with a couple of sources for the token generator and smart contract apart from Trust Me Bruh, and here is the senator to back it up, it was a lovely sight to see two links pop up for two different GitHub repositories. These two were so lovely in fact that they included codes for both of the things I needed, the generator and the contract. Then I hopped onto Remix and tried to watch the tutorial section of the website, and then womp womp. It did educate me that none of the links worked, so I have no learning material to work with. After a bit of goofing around, I managed to link my Git to Remix, and those repositories were just imported directly, no copy pasta needed. Thankfully, the codes were good enough that only a couple of errors popped up that quickly got patched. Then I tried to compile it and oopsie, you need to validate the code and pay the gas fee. Since the established titles Lord Ibanez really brushed off on me, I tried the cheap method of just saying bluff it and jump over to YouTube to see some videos on how to write customizable contracts. It was there that I found this channel. Mr. Sorry that I cannot pronounce your name. I did try to ask you on Twitter for permission to add your videos here as references, but since you didn't reply to me for the past week, this little shout out was way more than you should have gotten out of me. Beware that I'm watching you, pal. A channel about the topics you talk about with 18,000 subscribers but only getting one comment on most videos, which are from yourself most of the time, is susser than EDP left alone with a child. You might be next on my list. But okay, aside from planning ahead for juicy beef with him, I learned from him quite a bit about how OpenZeppelin works and how you add the code from there to Remix. What would follow is either you go with that or add your special components such as a market value limiter to avoid pump and dumps, which had to be one of the most hilarious things I have heard in a while, or maybe someone plans to add some sort of mechanism on how the tokens are burned or removed from liquidity pools so that later no one to maybe a couple of people could get their hands into the forbidden cookie jar. You see, I noticed that his smart contract covered pretty much all of the basics that are needed to launch a token within the blockchain, and it stood at around 600 something lines of code, which is more or less very good enough. The next thing that happens after the gas is pumped in Remix is that the coin in form of a long string is generated. That's where the generator we were talking about comes in really handy. With a similar tactic to the contract, you can also find the code for this one somewhere on the internet, which would automate the process so that the dev can stick back and not manually squeeze the hamster each time someone is to be victimized. With these checked, the last thing in this department is to get a supporting wallet that would store a bullshit. If this token is to be treated with the same respect as Logan Paul's Dink Doink, then you don't really have to worry about getting it audited. Just find a wallet that supports meme coins and the deed is sealed. To go down that route, you will need to provide provide a bunch of links and wallet addresses and names to authorize that wallet to accept your future Ponzi scheme. But if you want to become a listed Ponzi scheme with no utility, like Bitcoin, then you gotta go and speak with the likes of CZ, Influence, Sagandis, which is also called getting audited. After that, a bullshit can appear on Binance. When all of these are done, we have finished our part for most of the back end. Now we have to do the website development, which is not within my expertise, but basically the way I would do it is to use Visual Studio and some graphic modules to make up the interface, then convert that code into HTML and upload it to something like WordPress. Use Google Domains or GoDaddyless to get a domain. Then get it hosted on Web2 with AWS or something like that. Copy paste your WordPress code and boom, there's the front end. Then you will need to add a couple of ERC20 protocols, including the main wallet address and token thingies to the AWS backend, and that's about it. For the game aspect of a bullshit, well, if I wanted to yap about video game development, I would have just stayed at my day job for overtime instead of making this video. Congrats, and I tip my hat to thee if you managed to power through all the way to this part of the video and absorb all of that knowledge. I think I may have lost a bit of my cognitive capabilities along the way by using my brain cells like how one exhausts a full stack of braces when heading to fight Millennia. Sorry that I didn't use the Shadow of the Earth Tree bosses because I haven't played it yet. Anyhow, it would be only appropriate for me to draw some sort of conclusion out of this, and honestly, I'm not sure if I have enough evidence to fully deduce if Mr. Former CIA hacker Cracker managed to pocket 1.4 million of Logan's lunchly money before Logan could have wasted it tenfold himself. This guy's entire story didn't fully add up. At least that's how I thought of that situation, even though both Bone Ed and Logie are past the point of caring for Zoo Token, while their alleged victims are still left on read ever since Mr. First Name for a Last Name didn't fully refund everyone as he had promised. I'm not as resourceful as the likes of CoffeeZilla to tackle these sort of investigations, but I do think, at least on the technical aspects, I might be equipped to question a project development, whether it would be in form of a crypto scam or a video game or anything else computer related. And on the final note, my dear fellow cultists, do consider like commenting on this video before falling for something like Zoo Token, because your money should be prioritized to be spent on you and your attention on me. Okay, I'm adding this part post-edit, therefore juxtapose, massive understatement, allegedly, not financial advice, no offense, juxtapose allegedly. Use these in parts of the video where you were expecting me to say it, but I didn't. And use them wisely, because the supply is limited due to my fucks being runneth dry.